Good afternoon. I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News, coming to you from our digital desk. We want to talk about Cleveland's consent decree. It was 2015 that the Department of Justice came in, looked at the Cleveland Police Department, specifically their use of force, and determined that it was violating federal law and constitutional law in the way that it operated. So a monitoring team had to be put in place. A federal judge now oversees a number of different areas. There are 8 areas that needed improvement for the city of Cleveland, including use of force, crisis intervention, search and seizure, and officer accountability, to name a few. Well, it has been 10 years into the consent decree, and the police department, Police Chief Todd, as well as the lead moderator. There is a team of monitors that walk through, look at the different training, look at the use of force, look at all of these areas. There's dozens of subsections within each one of those categories, and rates whether or not the police department is in compliance, not in compliance, maybe procedural compliance, but eventually the city police department has to meet all of these areas in order for the consent decree to be lifted. The problem? That monitoring team is extremely expensive. In the past 10 years, City of Cleveland taxpayers have spent $60 million on this process to get the Cleveland Police Department back into compliance. That monitoring team has 19 individuals on it. Some of them are some very powerful attorneys. There are law enforcement members on that panel, as well as policy analysts. So this morning, now that it's been 10 years, they gave us time with the lead moderator, Carl Racine, as well as sitting down with Chief Todd. I was able to sit down with both of them. They gave us approximately 10 minutes to ask questions. And of course, as a taxpayer myself, as a citizen, there are 2 big questions. After we've spent $60 million, how close are we to being finished? And has there been actual improvement within the Cleveland Police Department, especially when it comes to use of force? Here is that 10-minute interview with the lead moderator, Carl Racine, and Cleveland Police Chief Todd. 10 years. What is the average time that a city is generally under a consent decree?
Yeah, I don't know if there's an average time. There are a number of consent decrees in the history of these consent decrees. Some have gone as short as 8 years. Some has gone as long as 22 years. And so the duration of a consent decree is really determined by the comprehensiveness and scope of the consent decree. As for Cleveland, the Cleveland consent decree is extremely comprehensive. And that's why we're focusing really hard and working well with the police chief here and trying to get as many assessments of the core areas of the consent decree done as possible so that we can accelerate the findings and get to a place where the judge can determine whether there's been substantial compliance.
Because from a taxpayer standpoint, this is not cheap. Your services are not cheap at all. The average taxpayer is going to say, 10 years, somebody's not doing their job. If we don't have this under control and turn this around and met the requirements of a judge, something doesn't look like it's working if it's taken 10 years.
Yeah, let me answer that. And let me, as a taxpayer myself, say I totally understand that perspective. Let me broaden the frame for just a moment. The police department here in Cleveland has been in existence for, I'll call it 135 years, maybe more. Through judicial findings and through events beginning in the 70s, 90s, and then culminating 2002 and 2014, there was a view that the police department had institutional and systematic problems related to unconstitutional policing. 10 years to fix issues and culture stuff that had long occurred in the grand scheme of things, while a lot of years is really not that much, so long as we can tell you that we're working really hard to get to a place where we assess make sure that the Cleveland's at a place where it's better than it was before, and then get out of town. And I can tell you that's our goal.
So you're saying this is almost a generational problem?
There's
that you need almost a whole new generation of officers in here that have been trained the right way, taught the right way.
So can I ask,
Please.
or answer a little bit on that?
Yeah.
So if you look at the consent decree as a whole, there's 200-something odd paragraphs that we have to be in compliance with. And some of those are related to, what's happened in the past. Some of them are about use of force, crisis intervention. But some of those are just procedural changes. It might be, adding a new position. It might be officer wellness, recruitment. And those are some of the paragraphs when you see the big, non-compliance. We're working on the hard stuff. We really are, focusing on that use of force, focusing on what impacts the community to make those, really hard changes. But it's not about systematic or a culture shift of everyone. It's about making the changes in our policies and training. It takes a long time. Each of these policies, you just can't write a policy in, a month and, hope to implement it in training. These take years, and our men and women have made adjustments throughout their years to be in compliance. And right now, we're fortunate enough to be in the assessment phases with a lot of this, which shows the hard work that we've done so far.
And it is about the assessments. What changes have been made, and is it working? Where are we as a city, as a department? Are we 80%? Give us a grade,
Sure.
I guess.
Well, let me just say that I will have been the monitor 2 months from now for 2 years. This is the first time that we're going through these rigorous assessments. We're assessing now 3 areas, and we're looking at assessing many more in 2025. I'll talk about use of force, an area that's currently under assessment. As the chief knows, we talk about use of force all the time. There's been significant improvement in use of force. That is that officers are exercising better judgment, better discretion. Officers are initiating de-escalation tactics and otherwise trying to keep the peace as long as possible before force is utilized. That's what we're generally seeing. The final assessment will tell the tale of the tape. Crisis intervention, we've seen, again, extraordinary positive efforts in regards to how officers are interacting with the many people who sadly are compromised mentally and otherwise present challenging circumstances to the public and to the police. Again, in that area, a significant improvement. You'll see our final assessments come out here in 2025. We're beginning to assess other areas, search and seizure, other areas around officer accountability and the checks and balances, and in time you'll see what we're finding. But to be clear, the areas that we're assessing, we've seen enviable progress.
How far along are we? Are we halfway there? I know that's got to be tough. There's no way to, I'm sure.
I'd be asking the same question, and I think it's fair for Clevelanders to ask that question. I think that we are just fully underway on those assessments that I identified. We've got others, coming on board. We really think that in the next year or two, there'll be a far better picture. And I think at that point, in a year or two, we can start talking about whether we see the light at the end of the tunnel. But give us a little bit of grace here, because we only started assessing for the first time last year.
Senator Moreno this week sent a letter to the brand new Attorney General, wants the whole thing thrown out. Your reaction?
Read his letter, appreciate the letter, and I know it's going to Attorney General Bondi, a friend, a person with whom I have great respect, for whom I have great respect. I don't think he's right on the law, unfortunately for his position. The law is very clear. When a settlement agreement becomes a consent order in a federal court, like we have here in Cleveland, jurisdiction lies within that federal judge. And I think that should this matter be contested, that will be the finding. The consent decree will remain in the court of Judge Solomon Oliver Jr.
And I'm assuming you would say that this will be the last one. I'm assuming you would say it would be bad for the city of Cleveland for all the work and all the money that's been spent to just simply throw it out now.
I think the city of Cleveland has made an investment in its police force, an investment in its community, to have a police force that practices constitutional policing, to have a public that trusts the way in which they are policed. I think it would be a grave mistake to take that away.
And if I can just make a point on that. So I want the community to know that we are committed to the changes that we have promised. And, you know, consent decree, no consent decree, whatever that is, we are going to keep moving forward. Right now, the Division of Police is moving forward with the consent decree. You know, it's here. We haven't had any orders that anything has changed. We're making these changes. We're committed to these changes. And we're committed to constitutional policing here in the city of Cleveland.
Anything else?
I appreciate the chief's hard work, her decisiveness, her leadership. I'm quite confident, as are the people on the monitoring team, that we have a partner here and are looking forward to further advancing the consent decree.
And just the last point I just want to make real quick. I think that there's just this misconception that's out there as far as, you know, that there's an adversarial relationship with the monitors. You know, we work together for progress, and we are on the same page. We want that continued progress. And the consent decree is a complicated document, you know, and it's, if there's downgrades or there's changes in it, there is that thought in the community that, oh, they're not making changes. But I would hope that people really look at what those paragraphs entail instead of making a judgment on the division as a whole, because some of them are related to, you know, there's a change in staffing. The Inspector General was a big topic. That was a big whole section of the consent decree that we had a downgrade. You know, when you look at the CPC, they're right in the middle of seating a new commission. If they're not seated in that evaluation period, that's a downgrade. So when you look at the next report and you say, look, they've had downgrades, I hope that people really concentrate on what are the actual downgrades, and, you know, about, instead of, you know, we're looking at all the positive things that our men and women are doing on a daily basis.
That is the interview with Police Chief Todd and the lead monitor, Mr. Carl Racine. You heard Chief Todd sort of allude to, boy, there could be some downgrades in the next report. We get a report about every 6 months. It's been a while since our last report, so clearly she's hinting that there may be some downgrades of compliance in the next report. But you heard from the lead monitor himself say that we are a year or two away from determining if we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So that $60 million price tag is going to increase the longer this plays out. But the bottom line, as they said, this is about making the community feel better about the police force that is overseeing crime in this town and the way the officers and the leadership conduct themselves. A very candid interview from the two, and we wanted you to see that in its entirety. Our 3 o'clock news starts in just about an hour, where we have 3.5 hours of news and first alert weather on Channel 19. We hope to see you over there. Until then, I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News. Have a good afternoon.
19 News is everywhere. Download our CTV apps and follow us on social media @Cleveland 19 News.